So this is a beautiful little book that we picked up at our local independent bookstore, Four Bears Books in Caversham, in Reading and in the UK. And this is absolutely lovely. Really like this book, highly recommend it. Am I a unicorn fan? I loved Pegasus from Greek mythology, flying horses and all that. I'm trying to remember if Pegasus has a unicorn. Is he a flying horse or a flying unicorn? You'll have to remind me below. I used to read that when I was younger and I can't remember now. I got this book for my daughter because she wanted it and she is a unicorn girl. We think this is amazing actually. So on the back of the book, it's very short and sweet. It says, like the eye of a shadowy storm, black smoke swirled around the fearsome unicorns, thunder rumbled in their wake, and bolts of lightning hit the earth far below. I'll read the main blurb to you because it's basically, it's based on an island in between Wales, England and Ireland in the United Kingdom. And this island has unicorn eggs and they need to bond with us. But if a unicorn doesn't find a human to bond with, and then it basically goes feral and causes all sorts of trouble and is a dark uniform, which I really liked. And that really is what pulled me in. So on the blurb of side, on the hardback front cover is, the island is calling. Skandar Smith has only ever wanted to be a unicorn rider, to be one of the lucky few selected to hatch a unicorn, to bond with it for life, to train together and race for glory, to be a hero. But just as Skandar's dream is about to come true, things take a more dangerous turn than he could ever have imagined. A dark and twisted enemy has stolen the island's most powerful unicorn, and as the threat grows even closer, Skandar discovers a secret that could blow apart his world forever. Get ready for unlikely heroes, elemental magic, sky battles, ancient secrets and ferocious unicorns in this epic adventure series that will have your heart soaring. Now, the reason I like this is because I like dragons. And it was like a unicorn dragon in a sense. So I actually finished this book quicker than most books I did like and knew I would like. So yeah, absolute kudos to A.F. Stedman. So I'm going to read an extract from this because I think it's really interesting, the relationships and the adventures that they have. And there's so many unicorn eggs, they don't have enough humans to link them to, so then they all go AWOL and naughty. And things aren't what they seem and how they appear. So it's really interesting. I can't say any more without giving it away and being a real spoiler person. So really, really worth a read. Here is the start of chapter 5, The Tunnel of the Living. Skandar and Bobby moved closer to the hatchery door inch by inch. To Skandar's relief, they didn't speak. He couldn't believe that the first person he'd had a proper conversation with on the island already knew he was lying. Okay, so she thought he was just lying about the fact that he'd come here in her helicopter, but it was only a matter of time, wasn't it? Until she raised the alarm. Skandar forced himself to take a deep breath, like he did at school when Owen and his friends were being particularly terrible. Who cared if one person knew? Why would she bother herself with him? And maybe she wouldn't even be able to open the hatchery door. Or maybe he wouldn't, and this would be all for nothing. Skandar was still too far back to see what was happening outside the hatchery, but every so often he heard a cheer, which meant someone had opened the door. Whether there was a long silence, Skandar felt his stomach lurch at the thought of being turned away. Stop stressing, Bobby hissed in his ear when he forgot to step forward. They're mostly islanders at the front. They basically all try out, remember? More of them get rejected because more try out. Didn't they teach you anything at your school? Skandar didn't say anything. Not wanting to prompt questions about the hatchery exam he definitely hadn't taken. As the line moved forward, mainlanders who'd failed to open the door started being sent back towards the helicopters. Some were crying, some looked angry, and others kept their heads bent in disappointment as they trudged the length of the line. Skandar tried to make himself look away, focusing instead on the top of the hatchery. Now he was nearer. He could see that there were unicorns with riders on top of the mound. And they had silver masks, just like the riders who had attacked Agatha. "What are they doing up there?" Skandar blurted. Bobby tutted. You're not the sharpest lemon in the tree, are you? That's not even a saying, and I wasn't talking to you, Skandar snapped. His nerves were getting worse. He could almost count the number of people ahead of him. Would those masked riders arrest him if they found out he'd never passed the exam? Was that what they were there for? So you were talking to yourself? No, I was just noticing. Bobby snorted and Skandar faced her, wondering if she was going to mention the helicopter again. But she didn't. Instead, Bobby pointed at the unicorns. They're armoured guards. I was eavesdropping. She dropped her voice to a whisper. And apparently they're here to protect us. Skandar gulped. From what? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the Weaver thing everyone's been talking about. She rolled her eyes. Now he was almost at the hatchery. Skandar could see a stern-looking man with a clipboard to the right of the door, calling out names. Presenting Aaron Brent! The man shouted. The long-legged boy in front of Skandar stepped forward, flicking his thick dark hair out of his eyes. Skandar felt a pang of jealousy. Aaron definitely looked more like a rider than he did. He could imagine the tall boy staring out from a chaos card. Aaron sauntered to the granite door and pushed his palm against it. Nothing. When that didn't work, he tried to pull at the round edge. Still nothing. He began kicking at the door in desperation. After a few painful moments, the clipboard man put a forceful arm around Aaron's shoulders and moved him away. Skandar watched Aaron disappear back towards the cliffs. Approach! Skandar heard the call and didn't move. His head was still spinning with the awfulness of Aaron being sent home just like that. He shouldn't have come with Agatha. He felt like the lies were written all over his face. His legs started to shake. Approach! Came the voice again. Bobby kicked his ankle. Go on! Skandar walked unsteadily towards the man. He was older than he'd looked from a distance. His black hair was peppered with grey, and he was so thin that his cheekbones dominated his sallow face. Name! Skandar Smith, Skandar said, his voice cracking. Could you repeat that? Quickly, we haven't got all day. His voice was clipped and harsh. Skandar Smith. The man's wiry eyebrows knitted together in a frown. Skandar held his breath while the man looked for his name on the clipboard. What if there was something Agatha hadn't thought of? Maybe they knew. Maybe they'd checked whether he'd sat the exam and... Presenting Skandar Smith! The man boomed. Skandar moved towards the hatchery door, his legs like lead. He had a mad impulse to run back to the helicopters. That way he'd never know. He could just always dream that he'd been destined for a unicorn because he'd never even tried the door. But he could feel the rider's eyes burning into him from above, and he had no choice but to reach out and place his palm on the gold granite of the hatchery door. For one heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. There was a roaring in Skandar's ears that had nothing to do with the sea thrashing against the mirror cliffs. He stared at the door, the disappointment so heavy his knees buckled, his shoulders slumped, and he started to step back and withdraw his palm. But as he did, there was a grinding of stone and a great creaking of ancient hinges. Slowly but surely the hatchery door was opening. Excitement exploded right from Skandar's toes onto the tip of his fingers, and he wasn't taking any chances. As soon as there was enough of a gap, he squeezed through the round entrance and into the darkness beyond. He didn't look back. The great door swung shut behind him. He was in. He'd done it. He was a rider. It didn't matter how he'd got to the hatchery. All that mattered was that there was a unicorn in here somewhere. A unicorn that had been waiting 13 years for him, just like he'd been waiting. He hardly dared to believe it, hardly even dared to think the word rider again, in case it was suddenly taken away. Skandar collapsed on the cold stone, put his head in his hands and let the tears of relief and of tiredness, of happiness fall. Then he remembered that if Bobby opened the door, she would step right on top of his head, and although he'd only known her a very short time, he was pretty sure she'd trample straight over him. Skandar scrambled to his feet, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. He was at the end of the long tunnel lined with flaming torches. He couldn't help but feel nervous. His textbooks hadn't said anything about the inside of the hatchery. He'd assumed it would all be straightforward. Open the door, get an egg, hatch his destined unicorn, and boom! They'd be bonded for life, ready to start training. He hadn't expected a creepy tunnel. He hadn't expected to be alone. He wished Kenna was with him. Even though she hated small spaces, she'd have shouted silly things that echoed off the tunnel walls to make them laugh. But there was no turning back now. 5 stars. Darn good read.